50 in the world imposing duties so steep they shred WTO principles. Starting today, most Indian goods entering US face a crippling 50% tariff, up from barely 3% just a year ago. For India, this marks one of the hardest trade shocks in decades. The scale of this hit is unprecedented. India exported $791.2 billion dollars of goods to US in 2024, mostly tariffed at under 3%. Now, two-thirds of these exports worth $60.2 dollars will be subject to a 50% duty, hammering labor-intensive industries like apparel, textiles, jewelry, shrimp, carpets, and furniture. Another 4% of exports, $3.2 billion, mainly auto components, will face 25% tariff. Only 30% of exports, including smartphones, pharmaceuticals, and petroleum products, are untouched. Sectoral impact. The 50% tariff makes India one of the most heavily taxed US trade partners, equal to Brazil but much higher than China, 30%, Vietnam, 20%, and EU or Japan, 15%. These new tariffs have been added to the existing ones. For example, shirts already have a 12% duty, and now Indian shirts will be charged 62% duty, compared to the 42% for those from China and 20% for those from Vietnam. This relative disadvantage will likely cut India's export to US from $86.5 billion in 2025 to around $50 billion in 2026. Labor intensive industries, where US accounts for over 30% of India's global exports, could see around 70 to 80% annual decline. Shrimp exports, $2.4 billion, could now face 60% duty, hurting farmers and factories in Andhra Pradesh, such as rivers like Ecuador and Vietnam take over. Diamond, gold, and jewelry exports to US are worth $10 billion. Share of US in Indian exports is 40%. We'll see 52% tariff, threatening jobs in Surat, Mumbai, and Jaipur. Textiles and apparel, 88 $10.8 billion, 35% share, will face up to 64% tariffs, devastating hubs in Tirupur, Noida, Gurugram, Bengaluru, Bengaluru, Ludhiana, and Jaipur, while Bangladesh and Mexico gain. Even carpets, handicrafts, furniture, and farm goods like basmati rice and spices are badly hit. This could wipe out decades of export growth for India. How can we ease the pain? India's current export basket is no longer sufficient to achieve high growth. Trade deals alone cannot compete for uncompetitive products and pricing. The action plan must combine structural reforms with targeted interventions. First, India needs deep reforms to cut input costs, simplifying labor laws. We also need to build deep domestic capacity in semiconductors, solar cells, and APIs to reduce import dependence. Second, India must initiate a nationwide reverse engineering program to replace low and mid technology imports where domestic products production capability exists. We did this with generic with great success 50 years ago. We need to repeat the feat for more products. For this, sector specific industrial laboratories at IITs, BITs, engineering colleges, and CSIR institutes should disassemble and analyze imported products such as pumps, bearing, motor, valves, hardware, and textile machinery. These labs could develop standardized, open access technical blueprints and manufacturing specifications. This will enable MSMEs to undertake precision component fabrication and allow large scale manufacturers to achieve mass production and scalability. Urgent measures. These are needed to shield exporters from the current shocks. Reinstate the interest equalization scheme with a 50,000 crore rupees annual budget to reduce financing costs for MSMEs in labor intensive sectors. Fast tracks to India UK FTA and accelerate EU trade talks to secure long term market access and regulatory certainty. Raise the GST extension limit from the current 20 to 40 lakh rupees to 1.5 crore rupees to cut compliance cost for 99% of the small funds, freezing up resources for investment and growth. launched a dedicated revival package for garments, textiles, carpets, footwear, and jewelry, focusing on backward linkage, competitive credit, and ecosystem support to restore competitiveness in sectors hardest hit by US tariff. Create a fully digital national trade network to unify export compliances on one platform, simplifying processes and enabling almost 1 lakh new small businesses to start exporting within a year. On the bright side, India's global exports are expected to stay in positive zone, and we hope that the US tariffs will come down soon. Good exports to other markets are projected to grow 5%, from $350.9 billion in 2025 to $368.5 billion in 2026, cushioning the US losses. The biggest driver is services exports, India's strongest suit, which are forecast to jump 10% from $383.5 billion to $421.9 billion, powered by IT, businesses services, fintech, and healthcare. Taken together, total exports of goods and services are to climb from $820.9 billion to $839.9 billion, a 2.3 gain percent despite the US headwinds. American tariffs will hurt, they will not derail India's export engine. Although the 50% US tariffs on goods may not last long. Washington first imposed a 25% duty and later doubled it, citing India's Russian oil purchases, a move critics call hypocritical as US and EU still import Russian goods. China, the biggest buyer of Russian oil, faces no such penalties. US officials face mounting media scrutiny over this double standard, fueling hopes that the extra 25% could soon be rolled back. That would leave India with a 25% duty, which might drop to 18 or 20% once negotiations conclude. Talks are expected to resume as both countries need each other economically. For now, India can take comfort in that. Unlike EU and Japan, it is held firm on key red lines in agriculture, dairy, and other sensitive sectors. The US tariff storm, like other storms, will pass. The challenge is to make global competitive goods, cut costs, and build self reliance so the next storm does not catch us unprepared.